The millionaire bet she'd cry on Christmas when he served divorce papers, but she shocked him with a gift that broke his heart forever. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to your new family channel, Mr. Peter Family. God bless you all. I promise, every story here will touch your heart and satisfy your soul. This channel is made with love for my beautiful family who enjoys short but powerful stories. Don't forget to drop a present in the comments so I know my family is here with me. The thing about having everything is discovering it can all disappear in a single phone call. Peter Gregory stared at his computer screen, watching 30 years of Gregory Enterprises' reputation dissolve in real-time social media posts. The SEC investigation had leaked that morning. Stock prices were hemorrhaging, board members were calling emergency meetings. His family's billion-dollar empire was 24 hours away from complete collapse. Mr. Gregory. His assistant's voice cut through the chaos. There's a woman here who says she can save your company. Peter almost laughed. Lawyers, consultants, and crisis managers had been streaming through his office all morning with promises they couldn't keep. What could one more person possibly offer? She said to tell you that Gregory Enterprises needs what she's selling more than she needs what you're buying, Margaret continued, and that you have exactly 36 hours before your competitors finish picking your bones clean. Something in the phrasing made Peter pause. This wasn't consultant speak. This was someone who understood predatory business practices from experience. Send her up. The elevator opened to reveal a woman who moved like she owned gravity rather than obeyed it. Tall, confident, wearing a charcoal suit that suggested serious business rather than fashion statement. She carried herself with the ease of someone comfortable in boardrooms and unimpressed by wealth displays. "Binter Sterling," she said, extending her hand with a grip that matched his own. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment. I know your time costs about $400 per minute. You've done your research. I always do." She settled into the chair across from his desk without waiting for invitation. "Your company specializes in traditional investments, real estate, tech, manufacturing, solid returns, predictable growth, but you're missing the fastest growing market in America." Peter leaned back. "Which is cultural resurrection." She opened her leather portfolio to reveal architectural renderings and financial projections that immediately commanded his attention. "I'm building something that's never existed, a cultural center that generates revenue while preserving community identity. Art education, cultural programs, and event hosting that pays for itself." The business model impressed him. Revenue streams from multiple sources, community impact that generated tax incentives, and appreciation potential that outperformed traditional real estate. But what caught his attention was the woman presenting it. "Your background?" he asked. "Stanford MBA, magna cum laude. 5 years at Goldman Sachs before I realized I wanted to build things instead of just moving money around." She met his eyes directly. "I've already secured partial funding from 3 other investors. Your participation would complete the capital requirements." "Why me?" "Because you understand scale, and because your philanthropy record suggests you might actually care about impact beyond profit margins." They talked for an hour. Peter found himself asking questions he hadn't considered in years about purpose, legacy, community value. Binter answered with intelligence that matched passion, business sense that served larger vision. "Ms. Sterling, this is intriguing, but I'll need time to review your materials." "Of course, but I should mention that Deutsche Bank wants to meet next week. They're very interested in the cultural investment space." She stood with fluid grace. "However, I'd prefer working with someone who gets it rather than someone who just gets returns." After she left, Peter sat staring at her business plan. The numbers worked, but something else nagged at him. When was the last time a meeting had engaged him beyond financial analysis? When had he last felt curious about another person rather than just their proposal? He called her the next morning. "Ms. Sterling, Peter Gregory, I'd like to discuss your project over dinner. Tonight, if you're available." Her laugh was warm, musical. "Mr. Gregory, are you asking me on a date or scheduling a business meeting?" "I'm honestly not sure." "Good answer. 8 o'clock? Le Bernardin?" "Perfect." Dinner lasted until midnight. Business discussion evolved into personal conversation that revealed depths neither had expected to share. Binta had lost her parents in a car accident when she was 21, inheriting debt and determination in equal measure. She'd built her first gallery while working 2 jobs, selling everything she owned except ambition and talent. "Tragedy either breaks people or teaches them what they're actually made of," she said over dessert. "I discovered I was made of stronger stuff than I'd imagined." Peter found himself sharing stories he never told, about inheriting expectations instead of freedom, about building wealth that felt more like burden than blessing, about wondering if success without meaning was actually failure in expensive clothing. "What would meaningful look like?" Binta asked. "I don't know. Maybe building something that outlasts quarterly reports. Maybe building something that changes lives instead of just moving numbers around." When he walked her to her car, the December air sharp enough to make breath visible, Peter felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Not for another acquisition or market victory, but for tomorrow's phone call, next week's meeting, the possibility that this remarkable woman might help him remember what it felt like to want something beyond what he already possessed. "Thank you for dinner," Binta said, keys in hand. "Thank you for the reminder that business can actually be interesting." She smiled, and Peter realized he was in serious trouble, the best kind of trouble. "I'll call you tomorrow about the project." "You'd better." Watching her taillights disappear into Manhattan traffic, Peter Gregory understood that something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in years, he was excited about tomorrow, not because it would bring profit, but because it might bring her. 3 months later, he would realize he had been completely unprepared for how thoroughly Binta Sterling would transform not just his investment portfolio, but his entire understanding of what it meant to be alive. Chapter 2. Building Castles in the Air. 6 months. That's how long it took for Binta Sterling to completely rewire Peter Gregory's existence. It started with business lunches that ran long, then dinner meetings that had nothing to do with cultural centers and everything to do with the way she challenged his assumptions about everything from art to ethics. "You know you're falling for me," Binta said over coffee at their usual cafe, 6 weeks into what had started as professional meetings. "You're incredibly direct. Life's too short for games. Plus, you call me every day with increasingly creative business questions. Yesterday you asked about the investment implications of color theory." Peter laughed, caught. "That was legitimate research." "Bullshit. You Googled art terms to have an excuse to hear my voice." "Did it work?" "I'm here, aren't I?" Peter set down his cup. "And you've been answering every time." "Touché." Her smile was radiant. "So what are we going to do about this?" "I was thinking dinner. Somewhere that isn't about business." "Finally asking me on an actual date, Mr. Gregory. I'm asking if you'd like to spend Saturday evening with me and see what happens when we're not talking about investment strategies." "I thought you'd never ask." Saturday arrived with the kind of spring evening that made Manhattan feel magical. Peter picked her up at her gallery, a converted warehouse in Tribeca that showcased emerging artists alongside established names. Watching Binta move through the space, greeting visitors who clearly adored her, he realized this wasn't just business for her. This was calling. "Ready?" she asked, appearing beside him in a black dress that was elegant without trying too hard. "You look beautiful. You clean up pretty well yourself." Dinner was at a small Italian place in the village, the kind of restaurant that survived on food rather than reputation. They talked about everything: childhood dreams, travel disasters, books that had changed their thinking. Peter found himself telling stories he'd never shared, laughing harder than he had in years. "Your family knows you're seeing someone?" Binta asked as they walked through Washington Square Park afterward. "I haven't mentioned it yet." "Why not?" Peter hesitated. How to explain that his family viewed his personal life as extension of business strategy, that relationships were evaluated for social advantage rather than emotional connection. "They're particular about who I date." Binta stopped walking. "Particular how?" "They have opinions about appropriate matches for Gregory men." "And I might not be appropriate?" The question hung between them like challenge. Peter could deflect, make light of it, pretend his family's prejudices didn't exist. Instead, he chose honesty. "They'll judge you based on things that have nothing to do with who you are." "Your family sounds delightful." "They're complicated. Most families are." Binta resumed walking, but something had shifted. "The question is whether you let their complications become yours." 2 weeks later, Peter invited her to his penthouse. He'd never brought a woman there. The space was too personal, too revealing. But with Binta, revealing felt natural. She moved through his home with genuine interest, studying his art collection, running fingers along book spines, standing at the windows that framed Manhattan like living paintings. "This is you," she said, examining a small Rothko he'd bought not for investment, but because it moved him. "The real you, not the boardroom version." "How can you tell?" "Because everything else is perfect, but this section is personal. These are pieces you love, not pieces you bought because someone told you they were valuable." She was right. The paintings clustered near his reading chair were the ones that spoke to him, that he actually looked at rather than simply owned. "You see things other people miss," he said. "I pay attention. Most people are so busy performing, they forget to actually live." They were standing close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle that suited her perfectly. The moment felt charged, full of possibility and promise. "Binta." "Yes?" "I'm going to kiss you now." "About time." When their lips met, Peter understood why people wrote poetry about kissing. This wasn't just physical attraction, it was recognition, connection, coming home to something he hadn't known he'd been searching for. They made love that night with tenderness that surprised them both. No hurry, no performance, just two people discovering each other with hands and hearts wide open. Afterward, lying in his bed with city lights painting patterns on the walls, Peter felt peace he hadn't experienced since childhood. "I love you," he whispered, the words emerging without planning or fear. Binta turned in his arms, eyes bright with tears and joy. "I love you too, Peter Gregory. All of you, even the parts that scare you." Spring became summer, summer became fall. They spent weekends at his house in the Hamptons, cooking together, reading on the beach, talking until sunrise about dreams that seemed more possible when shared. Peter had never experienced this kind of partnership, intellectual, emotional, and physical connection that made him understand why people wrote songs about love. "Move in with me," Peter said one October evening as they walked along the shore. "That's a big step." "I know. But I wake up thinking about you, spend my day wanting to tell you things, and fall asleep wishing you were there. This feels right in ways I didn't know existed." "What about your family? What about them?" "Peter." Her voice carried gentle warning. "You can't pretend they don't exist forever." Winter arrived with the kind of snow that made Manhattan look magical rather than dirty. They had been together 8 months when Peter proposed, and it felt both spontaneous and inevitable. "Marry me," he said as they stood in her gallery after closing, surrounded by art that represented dreams made real. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything. I love you. I want to build a life with you that matters." "Then yes, absolutely yes." The engagement ring had belonged to his grandmother, the only family member who had understood that love mattered more than status. As he slipped it onto Binta's finger, Peter felt his grandmother's approval across the years. They decided to meet his family at the annual charity gala, Gregory Enterprises' signature social event. Peter prepared Binta for what she'd encounter: his mother's icy politeness, his siblings' competitive edge, the careful way wealth displayed itself as tradition. "Just remember," he told her as they walked into the ballroom, "I love you, not them. And I love you, not their opinions." Evangeline Gregory wore black silk and diamonds like armor, greeting Binta with a smile that never warmed her eyes. "How lovely to finally meet you, dear. Peter has been quite secretive about his friendship." "Relationship, mother. We're engaged." The slight tightening around Evangeline's eyes was the only sign she'd been surprised. "How wonderful. I do hope you'll be happy." Maximilian approached with 2 drinks and predatory smile. "The famous Binta Sterling. I've heard so much about your gallery." "All good things, I hope." "Oh yes, though I must admit, I'm curious about your background. Peter's usually attracted to women from similar circumstances." Binta's smile never wavered. "Similar how?" "You know, same schools, same social circles, shared experiences that make marriage easier." "I wouldn't know," Binta replied smoothly. "I believe love is about choosing someone every day, not about checking boxes on social resumes." Peter watched his brother's smile falter and felt pride mix with protectiveness. Binta could handle herself, but she shouldn't have to. "Maximilian," he said quietly, "careful. Just making conversation, brother." The evening continued with subtle warfare disguised as polite interest. Cordelia questioned Binta's education, her business experience, her plans for the future with barely concealed suspicion. Through it all, Binta maintained perfect grace, answering rudeness with kindness, while never yielding an inch of dignity. Driving home, she was quiet. "You okay?" "Your family doesn't like me." Peter pulled over, turning to face her. "I don't care what they think." "Yes, you do. They're your family, Peter, and they're going to make our marriage as difficult as possible. Then we'll face that together." Binta studied his face in the dashboard light. "Will we? Or will you choose them when it gets hard?" "I'm choosing you. I chose you the moment you walked into my office." They married 3 weeks later in his grandmother's garden, surrounded by friends who celebrated their love rather than family members who questioned their compatibility. As they danced their first dance under stars that seemed arranged specifically for their happiness, Peter Gregory knew he had found his home in her arms. He couldn't know that his family's disapproval would soon test that certainty in ways that would challenge everything he believed about loyalty, love, and the courage required to protect what mattered most. Chapter 3. The Gilded Cage. "It's just temporary," Peter said as they pulled into the circular drive of the Gregory estate, "until we find our own place." Binta studied the imposing Georgian mansion through the car window. "How temporary?" "A few months, maybe less. And this was your mother's idea. She wants to get to know you better, bond with her new daughter-in-law." Binta's expression suggested she had different theories about Evangeline Gregory's motivations, but she squeezed his hand. "Then we'll make the best of it." The few months stretched into summer, then early fall. Every time Peter mentioned house hunting, Evangeline found reasons why they shouldn't rush. The market was volatile, interest rates were climbing. Wouldn't it be wiser to wait until after the holidays? "Besides," she'd add with a smile that never quite convinced, "we're having such a lovely time getting acquainted." Acquainted, as if 8 months of living under the same roof constituted casual introduction rather than systematic psychological warfare disguised as hospitality. The campaign began subtly, then escalated to psychological warfare that would have impressed military strategists. First, Evangeline accidentally double-booked the gallery for Binta's most important exhibition, forcing her to relocate at enormous cost and embarrassment. When confronted, Evangeline expressed confused concern. "Oh dear, didn't my assistant coordinate with yours?" How dreadful. Then Maximilian began spreading whispers in their social circle about Binta's questionable business practices and nouveau riche desperation. Investment opportunities that should have been straightforward suddenly became complicated. Partnerships she'd been cultivating mysteriously evaporated. The cruelest blow came from Cordelia, who used her connections to have Binta's biggest client, a museum acquisition worth $8 million, mysteriously cancelled. The official reason was budget restructuring. The real reason was a phone call from a Gregory family board member expressing concerns about the gallery owner's stability. "It's interesting," Cordelia mentioned over tea, studying Binta's reaction carefully. "How quickly reputations can change in our circle. One whispered doubt, one raised eyebrow at the right dinner party, and suddenly everyone's reconsidering their associations." Binta maintained perfect composure, but Peter noticed the small signs. She worked later, slept less, took calls in languages his family couldn't understand. Her gallery's revenues were dropping precipitously, and she was liquidating personal assets to keep operations afloat. "They're destroying my business," she told Peter one evening, exhaustion finally cracking her composed facade. "Your family isn't just excluding me. They're systematically dismantling everything I've built." "That's impossible. They wouldn't." 3 major partnerships cancelled this month. 5 exhibition deals fell through. My insurance rates mysteriously doubled. Your mother's friends are suddenly concerned about my financial instability and recommending other galleries to their networks. Peter felt ice forming in his stomach. "You think my family is behind this?" "I don't think, Peter, I know. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Binta maintained her composure, but Peter noticed the small signs of strain. She stayed up later, working on her laptop after he'd fallen asleep. She took longer walks around the grounds, phone calls conducted in languages his family couldn't understand. "What are you working on?" he asked one evening, finding her still at her computer at midnight. "Just gallery business. Coordinating with international artists, managing shipping schedules, different time zones, you know." She wasn't lying exactly, but Peter sensed there was more to it than she was sharing. Cordelia proved the most sophisticated operator. As the only daughter of a powerful family, she'd learned early how to wield exclusion like a surgeon's scalpel. Her cruelty came wrapped in concern, her criticism disguised as helpful guidance. "I feel terrible that you're so isolated here," she told Binta over afternoon tea. "It must be difficult, not knowing anyone in our circle. Though I suppose it would be awkward anyway. Most of Peter's ex-girlfriends are still part of the group." "I'm not worried about Peter's past." "Of course not. Though I do think it's important to understand what you're stepping into. The Gregory name comes with expectations, social responsibilities, charitable obligations, family traditions that go back generations. It can be overwhelming for outsiders. I'm sure I'll adapt." "I hope so. Peter's happiness depends on it, doesn't it?" What made it worse was that Peter could see what was happening, but felt powerless to stop it without creating open warfare that would make everything worse. His family had elevated psychological manipulation to art form, never saying anything overtly cruel, never stepping over lines that would justify confrontation. "They're just protective," he told Binta when she finally mentioned the constant subtle attacks. "They'll come around." "When?" "It takes time to adjust to change. They've never had to share you before." Binta studied his face with expression he couldn't read. "Is that what you think this is about? Sharing? What else?" She turned back to her laptop without answering, but something in her silence felt like judgment. Meanwhile, Binta's gallery business was expanding in ways Peter couldn't have imagined. The international calls weren't just about art exhibitions. She was building partnerships with emerging markets, investing in technology startups, developing real estate opportunities across 3 continents. Every morning, while the Gregory family slept late and planned their afternoon social activities, Binta rose at dawn to conduct business with associates in London, Singapore, Mumbai, São Paulo. Her Stanford MBA and Goldman Sachs experience had taught her to recognize opportunities others missed, to move quickly when markets shifted, to build wealth through intelligence rather than inheritance. The gallery had been her first success, but it was only the foundation. Using profits from art sales, she'd begun acquiring pieces by unknown artists whose work she believed would appreciate exponentially. When she was right, which was most of the time, she reinvested profits into diverse portfolios that generated returns her Wall Street training had taught her to maximize. "You're up early," Peter said one morning, finding her in the kitchen with coffee and financial reports. "Conference call with Tokyo. New investment opportunity." "Anything interesting?" "Sustainable technology. Solar panel manufacturing with potential for massive scale." She closed the laptop. "Want breakfast?" Peter should have asked more questions, should have paid closer attention to the woman who was building empire while his family attempted to tear down her confidence. Instead, he focused on managing family tensions that grew more difficult each day. The breaking point came in November, during what Evangeline called a family strategy session, but felt more like intervention. "This can't continue," his mother began without preamble. "She's disrupting everything we've worked to build." "Binta hasn't disrupted anything. She doesn't belong here, Peter. Anyone can see that. She's trying to fit into our world, but it's obvious she doesn't understand our traditions, our responsibilities, our way of life." Maximilian nodded agreement. "It's not her fault exactly. She simply wasn't raised for this level of society, the social pressures, the media attention, the business expectations. It's unfair to both of you." "She seems unhappy," Cordelia added with theatrical concern. "Isolated, stressed, working constantly instead of engaging with family activities. Maybe she'd be more comfortable with people from her own background." Peter felt familiar weight of family expectations pressing down on him like physical force. These were arguments wrapped in concern, but designed to make him question everything about his marriage, his judgment, his future. "I love her." "We know you do," Evangeline said gently. "But love isn't always enough, is it? Sometimes the kindest thing is acknowledging when 2 people are fundamentally incompatible." That night, Peter lay awake listening to Binta work beside him, laptop keys clicking softly in the darkness. When had they stopped talking before sleep? When had her mysterious business calls become more important than their conversations? "Binta, are you happy here?" The typing stopped. In the silence, Peter could hear his own heartbeat. "Are you?" she asked finally. "I asked first." Binta closed the laptop and turned toward him. In the moonlight streaming through their window, her face looked tired in ways that had nothing to do with sleep. "I'm building something, Peter, something important. But it's hard to build while constantly defending my right to exist in my own marriage." "They'll come around." "Will they? Or will you eventually decide they're right?" The question hung between them like accusation and prophecy. Peter reached for her, but she had already turned away, pulling covers over her shoulder like barrier against conversation that had revealed too much. Christmas was coming, and with it, decisions that would determine whether their marriage could survive the pressure of family disapproval and the growing distance between 2 people who loved each other, but no longer seemed able to bridge the space that pride, prejudice, and willful blindness had created between their hearts. Chapter 4. Pride. Before the Fall. Christmas Eve arrived with the kind of bitter cold that made Manhattan feel hostile rather than magical. The Gregory family's traditional celebration unfolded in their Fifth Avenue penthouse with military precision, every detail orchestrated to demonstrate refinement that money could buy and breeding could polish to perfection. Peter adjusted his bow tie in the bedroom mirror, while Binta applied lipstick with steady hands that betrayed none of the exhaustion he knew she felt. 9 months of living under constant scrutiny had worn them both down, but she continued facing each day with dignity that made his own growing weakness feel like moral failure. "Ready for battle?" she asked with smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's Christmas Eve, not warfare. Same thing with your family." The comment stung because it was accurate. What should have been celebration had become endurance test, every gathering an opportunity for his relatives to demonstrate exactly why Binta didn't belong in their rarefied world. The drawing room glittered with expensive decorations and expensive people drinking expensive champagne while making conversation that sparkled with wit and cutting edges in equal measure. Peter's cousins, aunts and uncles had assembled for the annual display of Gregory family solidarity, each one aware that this year's drama involved the family's first mixed marriage and their collective disapproval of Peter's choice. "Peter, darling." His Aunt Miranda air-kissed his cheeks while studying Binta with eyes that missed nothing. "And this must be your wife. How exotic." Binta extended her hand with professional grace. "Binta Gregory, lovely to meet you." Gregory now, of course, though I understand you maintained your gallery under your maiden name. How modern." The conversation continued with surgical precision, comments that sounded like compliments but felt like paper cuts, questions that appeared innocent but probed for weaknesses, observations that seemed casual but reinforced outsider status with every carefully chosen word. Maximilian found his opportunity during cocktails, cornering Peter near the bar with whiskey and brotherly concern. "She looks tired," he observed, watching Binta deflect another veiled insult with practiced grace. "This lifestyle isn't easy for everyone." "She's fine." "Is she? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she's barely hanging on. All those late-night phone calls, the constant work stress, the obvious tension whenever she's around the family." Maximilian sipped his drink thoughtfully. "Maybe this was a mistake, Peter." "Meaning what?" "Meaning you married for love, which is admirable, but love doesn't always translate into compatibility. Look at her. She's miserable here. You're stressed trying to make everyone happy, and the family's walking on eggshells trying not to say what everyone's thinking." "Which is what?" "That she's a lovely woman who'd be happier with someone from her own world, and you'd be happier with someone who actually fits into yours." The words found their target with devastating accuracy. Months of constant pressure, subtle manipulation, and persistent doubt had eroded Peter's confidence in ways he was only beginning to understand. Dinner proved even more challenging. Seated between distant cousins who discussed European vacations and boarding school memories with casual assumption that everyone shared similar experiences, Binta maintained perfect composure while being systematically excluded from conversations about people she'd never met and places she'd never been. "The Whitmore wedding was spectacular," Evangeline announced during the main course. 300 guests, all from the finest families. Catherine looked absolutely radiant. "Such breeding shows, doesn't it? That's what happens when two people truly complement each other socially." Cordelia nodded agreement. Shared backgrounds make such difference. Same schools, same social circles, same understanding of expectations and responsibilities. None of this awkward adjustment period where someone has to learn our ways. Peter watched Binta absorb these attacks with supernatural calm, never once allowing his family to see how deeply their words cut. Her strength amazed him even as his own cowardice disgusted him. When had he become the kind of man who sat silently while people he was supposed to love attacked the woman he'd promised to protect. After dinner, Edmund Gregory requested a private word in his study. The room smelled of leather and old decisions, portraits of dead Gregorys watching from gilt frames, while family patriarch delivered ultimatum disguised as paternal concern. "This has gone on long enough," he began without preamble. "That woman is destroying everything we've built. Binta has done nothing wrong. She exists in our world without belonging to it. Every day she remains in this family damages our reputation more severely." Edmund opened his desk drawer and withdrew legal documents that made Peter's blood freeze. Divorce papers, professionally prepared, financially generous, ready for signature. End this mistake before it destroys everything. These papers provide settlement that protects everyone's dignity while acknowledging that some matches simply don't work. "I won't sign these." "You will," Edmund replied with certainty that chilled him, "because you're not stupid enough to destroy your inheritance for a woman who doesn't love you." "She does love me." "Does she? Or does she love what marriage to you represents? When you present her with these papers, she'll reveal her true nature. She'll cry, beg, promise anything to maintain access to our wealth. Then you'll understand exactly what kind of woman you married." The argument continued for an hour, each family member taking turns to present evidence of Binta's unsuitability, her obvious mercenary motives, her fundamental incompatibility with Gregory family values. They painted picture of marriage doomed by irreconcilable differences, love blinded by sexual attraction, future destroyed by present delusions. "She married you for your money, Peter. When she realizes the game is over, she'll show her true colors. Just sign the papers, end this charade, and return to reality." Peter stared at documents while his family's arguments echoed in his head like poison. Pride, doubt, and months of accumulated pressure finally broke his resistance. His hand trembled as he reached for his grandfather's fountain pen, the same pen he'd used to sign contracts worth millions, but never to destroy something worth infinitely more. The signature felt like betrayal, even as he formed the letters. Peter Gregory, the name that commanded respect, opened doors, and now ended the most important relationship of his life with ink that might as well have been blood. An hour later, he stood outside their bedroom, holding papers that represented complete destruction of every promise he'd made to the woman sleeping inside. Peter expected to find Binta reading in bed, perhaps working on her laptop, certainly unprepared for devastating blow he was about to deliver. Instead, she sat in the window seat overlooking snow-covered Central Park, still wearing her black cocktail dress, but with expression that suggested she'd been expecting this moment. "Binta," his voice broke like adolescence, "we need to talk." She turned toward him with sad smile that held no surprise whatsoever. "Show me what's in your hands, Peter." Peter's throat closed as he extended the divorce papers, waiting for tears, pleading, desperate promises that would prove his family's assessment correct. Instead, Binta accepted the documents with hands that remained perfectly steady, scanning legal language that dissolved their marriage as efficiently as acid-dissolving metal. "I see," she said finally. "They finally wore you down. Binta, no." The single word carried enough authority to silence him completely. "You've made your choice. Now I'll make mine." She stood with fluid grace, folding papers with movements that suggested long preparation for this moment. Her composure was absolute, terrifying, and completely unlike anything Peter had expected. "Tomorrow morning, your family will gather for Christmas breakfast as they have for generations. I'll join them one last time and present my response to these papers. Until then, I suggest you enjoy your final evening as a married man." Peter stood frozen as Binta walked past him toward their bathroom, her dignity intact while his world crumbled around his feet. He had expected tears, arguments, desperate attempts to salvage their marriage. Instead, He had unleashed forces he couldn't understand or control. As the bathroom door closed with soft finality, Peter Gregory realized that pride might have just cost him everything worth having. Tomorrow would bring consequences he was completely unprepared to face. Chapter 5. The Queen's Gambit. Christmas morning dawned clear and merciless, winter light streaming through the penthouse windows to illuminate the Gregory family drawing room, where 5 generations of holiday traditions had unfolded with clockwork precision. The 12-foot noble fir dominated one corner, its ornaments reflecting light like captured fire, while wrapped presents created careful displays beneath branches, decorated according to customs that brooked no deviation from ancestral decree. The Gregory family had assembled with anticipation that had nothing to do with holiday celebration. Evangeline occupied her customary throne-like chair with satisfaction of a chess master whose endgame had finally arrived. Maximilian lounged against the marble mantelpiece with barely concealed excitement, while Cordelia perched on the antique settee like audience member awaiting promised entertainment. Even the extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins who had witnessed last night's drama, positioned themselves with interest that suggested this morning's events might prove historically significant. Peter stood apart from his relatives, hollow-eyed and shattered, having slept perhaps 2 hours while wrestling with guilt that consumed him like acid. The divorce papers remained where Binta had left them on the nightstand, legal documents that had transformed him overnight from husband to executioner of his own happiness. At precisely 9 o'clock, as Christmas breakfast was being served in the adjacent dining room, Binta entered the drawing room carrying 2 wrapped gifts that immediately commanded attention. She moved with regal bearing, dressed in emerald silk that made her look like queen addressing her subjects, her composure absolute and her expression serene in ways that made Peter's stomach clench with dread and anticipation. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice carrying warmth that seemed genuine despite circumstances that should have left her devastated. "I hope you all slept well. I have Christmas gifts that I believe will interest the entire family." Evangeline's smile carried triumph mixed with curiosity. "How thoughtful, dear. Though given last evening's developments, I'm surprised you're still here. I wouldn't dream of leaving without properly acknowledging this special day," Binta replied with grace that should have warned them all. "Christmas morning has always been about revelations, hasn't it? Gifts that change everything we thought we understood." She approached the coffee table where family gifts traditionally were displayed, placing her 2 packages with ceremony that drew every eye in the room. The wrapped boxes appeared ordinary, 1 small velvet jeweler's box, 1 larger manila envelope, yet something in Binta's manner suggested they contained power to alter everything. "Peter," she said, turning toward her husband with expression that mixed love and pity in equal measure, "would you open the first gift? I believe the contents will surprise everyone." Peter's hands shook as he accepted the small box that felt impossibly light, yet heavier than any burden he had ever carried. The wrapping paper fell away to reveal Cartier packaging that made his breath catch in his throat. Inside, nestled against white silk, lay a tiny silver rattle. The silence that followed was so complete that the antique grandfather clock's ticking sounded like thunder. Peter stared at the rattle while his brain struggled to process implications that rewrote everything he thought he understood about the previous evening's conversation. "Congratulations," Binta said softly, her words dropping into silence like stones into still water. "You're going to be a father. We're having a baby. Your first grandchild, the heir this family has wanted for generations." Evangeline's face went white as bone china. Maximilian's coffee cup slipped from nerveless fingers to shatter against marble floor. Cordelia made sounds like wounded animal, while Edmund Gregory leaned forward with sudden intense interest that transformed his entire demeanor. "How long have you known?" Peter whispered. "Confirmed it the day after Thanksgiving," Binta replied with a smile that held both joy and heartbreak. I was saving the news for Christmas morning. I wanted to tell everyone together, to share the joy with family who would welcome our child with love and celebration. The words fell like hammer blows against Peter's chest. While he had been signing divorce papers, his wife had been carrying their child. While his family had been plotting to destroy their marriage, new life had been growing that would bind them together forever regardless of legal documents. But that's not the only surprise, Binta continued, retrieving the second gift with movements that seemed choreographed for maximum devastation. Peter, would you open this one? I think your family will find the contents educational. This package revealed a thick folder bound in leather that looked ominous rather than celebratory. Peter's hands trembled as he opened it to discover something that made his blood freeze. Detailed documentation of every attack his family had made on Binta's business. Recordings of phone calls where Cordelia convinced museum boards to cancel contracts. Email threads showing Maximilian spreading false rumors about Sterling Enterprises' financial stability. Bank records proving Evangeline had used Gregory family connections to sabotage insurance rates and partnership deals. What am I looking at? Peter whispered, though recognition was already dawning with horrible clarity. Evidence, Binta replied, her voice carrying steel that could cut diamond. Every phone call recorded, every sabotage documented, every whispered lie preserved for posterity. You see, I learned something important during my months in this house. When people declare war on you, the smart move is to let them believe they're winning while you gather ammunition. The documents revealed a story of methodical documentation. Binta had known about every attack, recorded every conversation, saved every piece of evidence that proved the Gregory family's systematic campaign to destroy her livelihood. You knew, Evangeline breathed, her face white with shock and dawning horror. I knew from the first accidental double booking. Did you really think someone who built a business empire from nothing wouldn't recognize coordinated economic warfare when she saw it? Binta moved around the room like prosecuting attorney, presenting evidence to a jury. While you were congratulating yourselves on destroying my gallery's revenue, I was using the attacks to prove market manipulation. While you thought you were isolating me from your social circle, I was building partnerships with people who actually mattered. She placed additional documents on the coffee table, contracts, investment agreements, partnership deals that revealed the true scope of her success. Your sabotage failed spectacularly. Every client you turned away from my gallery went to competitors who then approached me for consulting. Every partnership you destroyed led to better opportunities with people who valued competence over bloodlines. Every whispered rumor about my financial instability just proved how threatened you were by my actual success. The numbers were staggering. Sterling Enterprises hadn't just survived the Gregory family's attacks, it had used them as catalyst for exponential growth. Revenue had tripled, international partnerships had expanded. The business empire Binta had built was now worth $42 million and growing. Furthermore, she continued, her voice growing stronger with each revelation, I now have legal documentation of criminal market manipulation, conspiracy to damage a business through false statements, and coordinated economic harassment. Any one of these charges would result in federal investigations that would destroy not just your reputations, but your freedom. The room fell silent except for the sound of Maximilian's labored breathing and Cordelia's muffled sobs. They had just realized that their casual cruelty constituted serious federal crimes. But I'm not vindictive, Binta said, setting down the final folder with gentle precision. I'm practical. So here's what's going to happen. You will publicly apologize for your treatment of me. You will make financial reparations for the business damage you attempted to cause. And you will never, ever interfere with my life, my child's life, or my business interests again. She paused, letting the implications settle like dust after an explosion. Or I will hand this evidence to federal prosecutors and watch your family name become synonymous with criminal conspiracy. Your choice. The documents revealed a story that began long before their marriage. Art acquisitions purchased with her Goldman Sachs savings that had appreciated 400%. Technology investments made with gallery profits that had yielded returns exceeding anything Peter's portfolio had generated. Real estate developments she'd been building since her mid-20s. "You've been planning this for 5 years?" Peter asked. "I've been building financial security since I was 25, Binta corrected. "I learned early that independence isn't optional. When I met you, I already had a $10 million foundation. Our marriage gave me access to better opportunities, higher-level partnerships, but the work was always mine." "This is impossible," Evangeline breathed, her composure finally cracking. "Quite possible," Binta replied with voice that carried steel beneath silk. "While you were protecting imaginary family honor, I was building real family security. Those dawn phone calls you all mocked? I was negotiating partnerships with emerging artists whose work is now displayed in museums worldwide. The gallery business you dismissed? I was developing art investment funds that have outperformed the S&P 500 by margins your financial advisors would kill for." She moved around the room like queen addressing her court, documents in hand providing evidence for every claim. "I never needed Gregory money. I married Peter because I loved him, not because I coveted your fortune. In fact, I've been anonymously supporting 3 Gregory business ventures that were struggling financially." The revelation hit like physical blow. Maximilian looked like he might vomit as he realized the angel investor who had saved his tech startup was the woman he had dismissed as gold digger. Cordelia's art acquisition fund, the one that had made her reputation in social circles, had been guided by expertise she had refused to acknowledge. "Furthermore," Binta continued, returning to stand before Peter with documents that represented complete reversal of power dynamics, "those divorce papers you signed last night have no legal authority over my assets whatsoever. My attorneys filed postnuptial agreements months ago that protect both my business interests and my ability to provide for our child independently." She paused, letting the implications sink in before delivering the final blow. "You see, I learned something important during my months in this house. I learned that love without respect is worthless, that marriage without partnership is prison, and that family without acceptance is just expensive loneliness." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "So I prepared for the possibility that Peter would choose your approval over our future. I built something that could never be taken away, no matter how many legal documents you convinced him to sign." Peter felt the room spinning around him as he realized the magnitude of his betrayal and the extraordinary nature of the woman he had destroyed through weakness and pride. Binta hadn't just survived his family's attacks. She had been building fortress of success while preparing for war they never saw coming. "Why?" he whispered, the single word containing all his guilt, confusion, and desperate need to understand. Binta's expression softened slightly, revealing glimpses of the woman who had loved him before pride poisoned everything between them. "Because I hoped you would eventually find courage to choose love over family approval. I built my independence so we could face your prejudices as equals, partners strong enough to withstand disapproval together." She moved toward the doorway with dignity intact, leaving papers scattered like evidence of completely shifted battlefield. "But you chose them over me, Peter. You chose their comfort over our child's future, their traditions over our love story. Those divorce papers proved that you never truly believed in us, never truly believed in me." As she reached the threshold, Binta turned back toward family that sat in stunned silence, their assumptions shattered like Maximilian's coffee cup. "Merry Christmas, Gregory's. I hope you find what you're really looking for, because it was never about protecting family honor. It was about protecting family pride. And pride, as they say, comes before the fall." Peter watched the strongest, most remarkable woman he had ever known walk away from his family with head held high, carrying his child and fortune they could never touch, leaving behind wreckage of his own making and regret that would haunt him for the rest of his life. In the silence that followed, Edmund Gregory spoke for the first time that morning, his voice carrying wonder and shame in equal measure. "My God," he whispered, "what have we done?" Chapter 6. Redemption and Renewal. The week between Christmas and New Year had always represented transformation for the Gregory family, a time when the previous year's ledgers were balanced and strategies for the future were carefully calibrated. This year, however, the family estate felt less like sanctuary and more like mausoleum, where the living grappled with consequences of choices that had shattered more than marriage vows. Peter had not emerged from his father's study since Christmas morning, surviving on black coffee and whatever food Margaret delivered without being summoned to intrude on grief that seemed to devour him from within. The mahogany desk where generations of Gregory men had forged decisions that shaped empires now held divorce papers that represented the complete annihilation of everything Peter had believed about himself, his marriage, and his capacity to choose love over cowardice when tested by fire. The silver rattle sat beside legal documents, like accusation and promise combined. Every time Peter's eyes fell upon it, he experienced fresh waves of self-loathing that made breathing feel like betrayal of air better used by people who possessed courage to protect what mattered most. His unborn child, a son or daughter, who would carry Gregory blood but never know their father as anything more than the man who chose pride over parenthood. Edmund Gregory found him there on December 28th, slumped in the leather chair where his grandfather had taught him chess and life lessons about honor that Peter had abandoned when family pressure became unbearable. "Enough," the old man said with authority that brooked no argument. "Self-pity serves no purpose when action might still salvage what you've destroyed through weakness." At 87, Edmund Gregory commanded respect that transcended age, his mind sharp as the business acumen that had built the family fortune and his moral compass still pointing toward principles that his descendants had apparently forgotten. He settled into the chair opposite Peter's, with movements that suggested conversations were preferable to lectures, but ultimatums remained available if necessary. "Your wife is extraordinary," he continued without preamble. "In 60 years of business dealings, I have rarely encountered someone who combined intelligence, integrity, and strategic thinking with such remarkable results. While your mother, brother, and sister were plotting her destruction, she was building empire that puts most of our investments to shame." Peter's throat felt lined with glass. "I know." "Do you?" Edmund's gaze could have cut steel. "Because your actions suggest you believed their poison rather than trusting evidence of her character that surrounded you for months. That woman loved you despite your family's cruelty, supported our business interests anonymously, and carried your child while you were signing papers to destroy her future." The words landed like physical blows, each one deserved and devastating. Peter had replayed Christmas morning 1,000 times, analyzing every revelation that proved how completely he had misjudged the woman who had transformed his existence from hollow success into meaningful partnership. "What would you have me do, grandfather?" "She won't speak to me. Her attorneys have already responded to the divorce papers with demands that protect her interests and our child's future. I destroyed everything." Edmund leaned forward with intensity that commanded absolute attention. "Then you rebuild everything, not with words or gestures or romantic foolishness, but with actions that prove you've learned what love actually requires when tested by adversity." That afternoon, Edmund Gregory convened what he called family reckoning in the same drawing room where Binta had revealed truths that shattered their comfortable prejudices. Evangeline, Maximilian, and Cordelia, assembled with expressions ranging from defiant to defensive, apparently believing they could continue justifying behavior that had nearly destroyed everything they claimed to value. Your treatment of Binta Gregory, and yes, she remains part of this family regardless of pending legal proceedings, was shameful, cruel, and strategically stupid, Edmund began with voice that could have frozen champagne. While you were protecting imaginary family honor, you were attacking woman who was actually protecting family finances. Your bigotry nearly cost us heir we've wanted and daughter-in-law whose business acumen exceeds your combined capabilities. Evangeline attempted interruption that died beneath her father-in-law's withering stare. Maximilian, Cordelia, your trust fund privileges are suspended indefinitely. When you demonstrate genuine remorse through actions rather than words, we might discuss restoration of financial support. Until then, you'll discover whether your talents extend beyond spending money you didn't earn while insulting people who deserve your respect. The siblings exchanged glances that mixed panic with disbelief. Their entire lifestyle depended on Gregory family wealth they had assumed was unconditional birthright. Evangeline, your management of household affairs and family social calendar is terminated immediately. Since you used both positions to facilitate cruelty toward family member who deserved protection, you'll spend remaining time reconsidering what family loyalty actually means. Edmund's restructuring of family dynamics was swift, thorough, and designed to demonstrate that actions carried consequences that extended beyond hurt feelings to financial realities that commanded attention when appeals to conscience had failed. Meanwhile, Peter began his own campaign of redemption that started with liquidating personal assets to establish the Binta Gregory Foundation for Arts Education and Community Development. The foundation received initial funding of $15 million from Peter's private investments, stocks, and real estate holdings that represented everything he owned independently of family wealth. The Foundation's mission statement, published in major newspapers and business journals, served as public apology and commitment to supporting causes that Binta had championed throughout their relationship. Peter interviewed directors, established grant criteria, and created operational structure that ensured the foundation would continue supporting artists and communities regardless of his personal circumstances. He resigned from 3 prestigious country clubs where his family's prejudice had been nurtured and displayed, replacing those memberships with volunteer work at community centers where Binta had spent countless hours supporting programs he had never bothered to understand. Peter discovered muscles he had forgotten he possessed while painting murals, teaching business skills to young entrepreneurs, and learning that wealth meant nothing without purpose beyond accumulation. Every action was reported back to Binta through mutual friends and business associates who watched Peter's transformation with interest, that suggested even former skeptics recognized genuine change when they witnessed it consistently over weeks rather than days. On New Year's Eve, Peter stood outside Binta's gallery, holding keys that represented everything he owned of value: the Hampton estate he had inherited from his grandmother, the Manhattan penthouse where they had first kissed, and vintage Aston Martin that had belonged to his father. He was prepared to sign over ownership of everything if doing so might prove that his commitment transcended legal obligations or financial considerations. Binta found him there at midnight, her silhouette framed against gallery windows that displayed works by artists she had supported when everyone else dismissed their potential. Her pregnancy was beginning to show, gentle curve that spoke of life growing despite circumstances that could have destroyed hope for their future together. "Hello, Peter." Her voice carried no anger, no bitterness, no triumph, only quiet assessment of man who had fallen so far that climbing back required complete reconstruction of everything he thought he understood about love, loyalty, and courage. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he said, the words emerging from depths where pride had finally died completely. "But I'm asking anyway, not for my sake, but for our child's future. Let me prove that I can become the man you married, the man you believed I could be, before my family's poison convinced me to doubt everything that mattered." Binta studied his face in streetlight that cast shadows across features that had aged visibly during their week of separation. "What are you offering?" "Everything," Peter replied simply. "My wealth, my time, my life, rebuilt around protecting what we created together rather than preserving what my family expected me to inherit." She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume and see exhaustion that spoke of weeks spent wrestling with decisions that would shape not just her future, but their child's legacy. "I won't live with your family again," she said finally. "I won't subject our child to people who believe breeding matters more than character. If we rebuild our marriage, it happens independently of their approval or disapproval." "Yes. I won't pretend their treatment didn't happen, or that it won't influence how I trust you in future crises. You chose them over me once. I need guarantees it won't happen again." "Whatever you require." Binta reached for his hands with gesture that felt like benediction rather than forgiveness. "Then we start over, Peter Gregory, not as naive lovers who believe love conquers everything, but as partners who understand that love requires courage, commitment, and willingness to fight for what matters most." 1 year later, the Gregory estate echoed with sounds that previous generations had never heard: genuine laughter, unconditional love, and the delighted coos of 3-month-old Elizabeth Gregory as she discovered Christmas morning magic in her grandfather Edmund's experienced arms. Peter watched his daughter explore wrapping paper with wonder that reminded him of his own capacity for joy, while Binta supervised from her chair beside the fireplace with smile that spoke of happiness earned through surviving tests that had forged rather than broken their marriage. Evangeline approached hesitantly, carrying gift wrapped with care that suggested genuine thought rather than obligatory gesture. "For Elizabeth," she said softly, her voice carrying humility that had replaced arrogance through a year of consequences and contemplation. Maximilian and Cordelia had returned to family gatherings only after demonstrating genuine change through volunteer work and public apologies that cost them pride, but restored their access to trust funds and family respect. Their transformation remained tentative, but progress had replaced regression in ways that offered hope for continued growth. As Peter held his daughter, while Binta received embraces from family members who had learned to treasure her strength rather than resenting it, he understood that true wealth couldn't be measured in portfolios, but in moments that transformed existence from hollow success into profound meaning. Their love story had survived tests that destroyed weaker foundations, emerging stronger for having been forced to prove its worth through flames that burned away everything except what mattered most. Christmas morning light streamed through windows that had witnessed generations of Gregory family traditions, but this year it illuminated something unprecedented, a family rebuilt on love rather than legacy, where acceptance was earned through character rather than inheritance, and where the future promised hope because the present had been purchased through courage to choose what was right over what was comfortable.